So, I thought today we'd talk about marker lights because the system has been completely reworked in 9th edition. And I chose these to sort of represent the different types of marker lights you can find in the Tau Codex and how they interact with the new marker light rules. Because while the rules have been simplified for marker lights, there's only one effect now instead of 5 separate effects as there were in 8th edition. Different models have different ways of interacting with how they can use marker lights. So I've got a sky ray, which will be our vehicle. I've got a marker drone, which will be our drone. I've got a Pathfinder. They have their own unique connection to the marker light rules. And I have taken my custom cadre fireblade to represent how standard infantry will interact with marker lights. But before we get into their specifics, let's get into the basics of how the marker lights work. Just grab my codex over here. So let's just have a look at the marker light on its own. You'll find it and all the rules for marker lights on page 93 of the codex. It's with the sort of general army rules. Things such as philosophies of war, rules for battle suits, manta striking, deep striking, and so on. So, fire marker lights. Action. One or more marker light units from your army can start to perform this action at the start of your movement phase. So that's when it begins. At the start of your movement phase, they can start to perform this action. Then it specifies aircraft marker light units can perform this action. I believe they're referring to, is it the Sunshark bomber that has a marker light? Yes. So the Sunshark bomber has a marker light, and that's, I think, what they're referring to with aircraft marker lights. The action is completed at the start of your next shooting phase. So the action starts, beginning of movement, and then at the beginning of shooting, it's completed. If this action is successfully completed, for each model in that unit that is equipped with one or more marker lights, for each marker light that model is equipped with, select one enemy unit within 36 inches of that model that would be an eligible target for that model if its unit had been selected to shoot, and roll 1d6. On a 3+, the enemy unit gains 1 marker light token. There's a lot going on there. This is very heavily specifying a lot of things. Simply starting off, the range has not changed. So it's 36 inches for marker lights, as it was back in 8th edition as well. So it specifies that it must be something that would be eligible as the target for a shooting attack. Because technically firing a marker light is not a shooting attack. So it has to specify this. That means you cannot be targeting characters that are blocked or prevented from targeting in some way from regular shooting attacks. So it works in that way the same as a shooting attack. Then it's only on a 3+. There are, as far as I can tell, no ways to negatively modify this to get a -1 or anything like that. So any targets that would have, excuse me, fighting off a burp there. Any targets that would have, say, a -1 to hit or cover or anything like that, it doesn't do anything. It doesn't matter. It just, on a 3+ on that D6, a marker light is there. That's how that works. So let's keep going. because here we get to the more specific unit types. While a vehicle or drone unit is performing the fire marker lights action, that unit can move without that action failing. So vehicle or drone. If it does, until the end of the turn, models in that unit without the vehicle or drone keyword that are equipped with any marker lights are treated as not being equipped with any marker lights for the purpose of the fire marker lights action. Each time a Tau Empire unit, excluding Tau Auxiliary, so your Vespid and your Kroot, will not be taking advantage of marker lights. At least in most cases, but we'll get to that later. Each time a Tau Empire unit is selected to shoot. Each time a model in that unit makes a ranged attack against a unit with one or more marker light tokens, add 1 to the attack's hit roll. So that is the marker light effect in 9th edition. You're adding 1 to the hit roll. Very good, solid. After that unit has finished making attacks, for each enemy unit targeted by those attacks, remove 1 marker light token from that enemy unit. So, essentially, if there is a marker light, or more than 1 marker light, on an enemy unit you're targeting, 1 unit attacks that target. Once that whole unit has finished resolving all of its attacks, you remove 1 of the marker light tokens. If any remain, you can take advantage with other units. So essentially it works like this. Each unit from your army that fires at a unit that has marker lights on it uses 1 of those lights. So if you have 3 marker lights, for example, on an enemy unit, 3 of your units can fire at it and gain the benefits of the marker lights. They will get that +1 to their hit rolls. So the action, since it starts at the beginning of the movement phase and ends right at the beginning of shooting, means that regularly you won't be able to move. You'll be performing the fire marker lights action. And that brings us to our first unit type. I've got my Cadre Fireblade. He is an infantry. He's not a drone. He is not a vehicle. So he has a marker light stock, which is very nice. That means, though, that this Cadre Fireblade must remain stationary if you wish to fire the marker light. That's just how that works. So you declare at the beginning of movement, okay, Cadre Fireblade will be firing his marker light. He can no longer move. Although, an interesting specification and an interesting change is that seeing as the marker light is not a weapon that is fired, and seeing as the action is completed at the beginning of shooting phase, this model, while it cannot move, can, in its movement phase, fire the marker light, and then it can shoot its weapon in the shooting phase because the action has already been completed. So it also means that this Cadre Fireblade can fire his new, I think he has a special pulse rifle. Yes, it's called the Fireblade Pulse Rifle. So, beginning of shooting, declare marker light. Marker light goes out at the beginning, beginning of movement, excuse me. Fire the marker light, beginning of shooting, the marker light goes out, and you can still fire. You cannot move. But if we have a drone with a marker light, this drone, and all other drones like it that have marker lights, can fire their marker lights and move. So they can do both without the action failing, which is quite cool. That also means that vehicles, like the Skyray gunship that has 1, 2 marker lights, can fire those marker lights and move without the action failing. And just like the Cadre Fireblade, this can fire its marker lights at the beginning of the movement phase, and then the marker lights go out, at the beginning of shooting, and it can fire its weapons. It can move in between that. Now, there was a bit of confusion, for me at least, the first few times I had used these marker lights. And that was, when does the marker light go out? Like, you declare that the action happens at the beginning of the movement phase. That much is clear. But when must the marker light hit the target? Because it's interesting. If a drone or a vehicle fires a marker light, it can also move. So does it need to fire its marker light and then it can move? Or can it move and then fire its marker light? The reason this is important is because perhaps something isn't in line of sight unless you move. So, an interesting distinction, and I just noticed this. So let me go through just a few pieces of this. So it says, units from your army can start to perform this action at the start of your movement phase. We know this. The action is completed at the start of your next shooting phase. So that is when the action is completed. But it doesn't say that's when the marker light is fired. So let's clear this up with one little bit more. If this action is successfully completed, for each model in that unit that is equipped with one or more marker lights, for each marker light that model is equipped with, select one enemy unit within 36 inches of that model. So, this is the distinction. The action, we know, is completed at the start of the shooting phase. So, if the action is successfully completed, then you select a unit to target with that marker light. With the way it's worded, that leads me to believe that this drone or any vehicles can declare, okay, I will be using the marker light action with this. And then I can move, and then once the action has completed, then I choose a target and the marker light goes out. That seems to be the way that it works, the way it's declared here. So, beginning of the movement phase, declare a marker light. And beginning of shooting phase, the action is successfully completed. And when it is successfully completed, then you select a target for that marker light. And on a 3+, you get your marker light token on your target. That's how that works. So, if we go through this again, the Cadre Fireblade will choose to do the action. Then it cannot move. At the beginning of the shooting phase, marker light goes out, and he can shoot afterwards. Drone or vehicle with marker light can, at the beginning of the movement phase, use the marker light action and move during the movement phase without the action failing. Once the action has been completed, then you select your targets for the marker lights and they go out. So that is how it works in a nutshell, effectively. Although, there is one great exception. And for this reason, it's one of the units I think is going to be a real standout. And I think it already has been a real standout in this codex so far. And that is the Pathfinder. So Pathfinders now must be in squads of 10. So you must have 10 Pathfinders in a squad. You can select some of their specialized weapons, in which case you sacrifice the marker light and the pulse carbine they come equipped with traditionally, and you give them a more specialized weapon. But this can only be done for 3 of the 10 Pathfinders. So that means a squad of Pathfinders will have something between 7 and 10 marker lights on them, which is a lot. So if you imagine hitting on 3s with those, you'll probably get something like 6, let's say, marker lights. And each of the marker lights, by the way, can select any number of targets. So just because you have 10 marker lights that are in one unit does not mean all of those marker lights must target the same thing. Each of those 10 marker lights can select whichever target is eligible, of course. So any target that is within line of sight, within 36 inches, and eligible to be targeted as though it were a shooting attack. So no targeting characters that could not normally be targeted, for example. Now, the Pathfinders, it's not simply because they have 10 marker lights or 7 marker lights or however many you decide to have in your squad. You will have at least 7. Pathfinders are particularly special because of their interaction with marker lights. Not a drone, right? Not a vehicle, also. So normally, they wouldn't be able to move and fire. But if we look at the Pathfinder page in the Tau Codex, we have an ability, Target Uploaded. This unit can start the Fire Marker Lights action at the end of your movement phase, instead of at the start. So there you have it. Nice and easy. So in this way, the Pathfinders get around being regular infantry and not being a drone or a vehicle. So now they're able to, at the end of the movement phase, paint a target, which is quite nice. So there you have it. Yes, that is how marker lights should work. So some units will have their own special interactions and some will not. But let's remember the finer points, or the important points rather. The action must be declared at the start of the movement phase, unless it's a Pathfinder. The action is completed at the start of the shooting phase for everything. So, units cannot move while firing marker lights, unless you're a drone or a vehicle. And the marker lights will go out once the action is successfully completed. And sorry, by go out, I mean you will pick a target to hit with those marker lights when the action is successfully completed at the start of the shooting phase. That's how it works. There's one interesting thing as a little bonus that I'll go over, is one of the stratagems. And this is a stratagem that is specific to Pathfinders. And for me, in the few games that I've played with this new codex, it has been an instrumental tool and worth 1 command point every single time. So I'll read it out here for you. It's called Recon Sweep. It is on the 3rd page of Stratagems in the Tau Codex. So that'll be page 68. Recon Sweep. The little flavor text. Pathfinders are the eyes and ears of the Tau war machine, always operating 10 steps ahead of their foe. Cool. So use this stratagem in your shooting phase. When a Pathfinder unit from your army successfully completes the Fire Marker Lights action. So this happens when they successfully complete it. So once you've successfully completed that action, then this happens. Each time you roll to see if an enemy unit gains a marker light token as a result of that action completing, add 1 to the roll. This means that those 7 to 10 marker lights will mark targets on 2s. And bear in mind, this is not a regular shooting attack that is subject to negative modifiers. So it's always going to hit on 2s if you can hit something. If you can see something and they're within 36-inch range and they would normally be eligible for a shooting attack, they can be targeted with these 2+ to hit marker lights. Furthermore, right at the end of the stratagem, that unit, the Pathfinders, can make a normal move. So, what would normally be one of the frailest units in the Codex with 5+ armor, 1 wound, and toughness 3, can now move, then at the end of movement phase, decide to use the fire Markerlights action. At the beginning of the shooting phase, the action is completed. Then you can play the stratagem. You select your targets for your Markerlights. They go out, so they hit their targets on a 2+, where there is no way to bring that down to a 3+, 4+, whatever. So they'll always hit on a 2+, whichever their targets are. Remember, it doesn't have to be the same target for all 10 Markerlights. And after all those Markerlights are fired, the Pathfinders can then move a normal move, which for them is 7 inches, which can allow you effectively, in a lot of cases, pop out from cover, fire the Markerlights, pop back in. Or move forward, fire Markerlights, move somewhere else. The variety and versatility of that stratagem will also largely depend on the battlefield setup and where you want those Markerlights and those Pathfinders to be. But it's an ideal stratagem for keeping a unit that is very valuable in that it contains a lot of reliable Markerlights. It keeps them alive, or it can keep them alive. If you can keep them out of line of sight or pull them back behind your main forces, it can be very valuable. And just from a, for me at least, from a flavor standpoint, this is the first time I've seen Pathfinders kind of true to the way they're described in their lore and flavor text. It's really nice, this ability to jump out, paint the targets in really, really dangerous areas, and then fade away as the main Tau force can drop in some damage. So, all in all, that's how Markerlights work in the Tau Codex now. No more gradient or graph of different Markerlight effects. It's simply a +1 to hit for 1 unit for 1 Markerlight. And an interesting side note, Seeker missiles are no longer just auto hit on 6s, which was super dumb. They now hit at whatever the unit's ballistic skill is. So no more need for Markerlights for those. I hope this cleared some things up, and thanks for watching.